Unfortunately, Meghan has never been authentic. She has to think about everything. She's not spontaneous. Everything she says is pre-planned and rehearsed. It makes me laugh because I know all her looks and expressions. I know when she's faking it for the cameras. She's trying so hard to be perfect that she tenses up every time the camera is on her. The best cooks are funny. They mess up. They are human. She just wants to be perfect. It's so sad because she's trying so hard to stay in the limelight. One of the most brutal reviews thus far of With Love Meghan, the Duchess of Sussex's Netflix disaster. And guess whose words they were? Her own father, Thomas Markle, who has provided a scathing analysis, including revealing the multitude of lies in the Netflix series. And we're going to get into some of those today with Brittany, editor of the Royal News Network. I mean, Thomas Markle is completely right, isn't he, Brittany? However, it is still quite brutal. This is his daughter that he is critiquing. However, the thing that he is particularly annoyed about is the fact that Meghan has tried to paint her childhood as some sort of latchkey kid. And he does say, look, occasionally we did eat TV dinners because he was working two very successful big Hollywood jobs. But he says, Brittany, that they would eat out at least 3 times a week. And far from growing up on fast food, Meghan's favourite restaurant was Musso and Frank in Hollywood, a very expensive eatery, which has been around since 1990. Stars who used to eat there include Frank Sinatra, Bing Crosby, Marilyn Monroe. So, Brittany, yet again, Thomas Markle has exposed the big fat lies from his daughter.
Well, Dan, for sure. Meghan has constantly tried, I think, to reframe her childhood as some sort of great struggle, that she was in somehow like a bad area of Los Angeles, and that she had everything was a bit challenging. And she had to go to the old spaghetti factory. She mentioned this in a letter to one of our, I think, senators or something. The old spaghetti factory is a pretty nice restaurant. It's a chain, but the food dishes there are pretty expensive. And so she is totally trying to reframe everything in order to fit a specific agenda. And I'm always curious, how many versions of her childhood did she tell Prince Harry at this point? Because I've always been under the conclusion, you could say, or the assumption that the reason Meghan Markle did not want Prince Harry to meet her father is that he would not go along with her narrative about her childhood struggles. Because, I mean, she went to private school. She had, I think, a fantastic childhood in many ways and was well taken care of. But now she sort of, denigrates her father and says, oh, no, wasn't that great or what have you, when it was actually quite good. She led an upper middle class lifestyle, but I don't think that is a story she has told her husband in the slightest.
No, of course not. By the way, we are looking at new pictures of the husband, the hair-challenged husband, the follicle-challenged husband, Prince Harry, who was at the 1805 Rock for Responders benefits at the Granada Theatre in Santa Barbara, California. Meghan seems to have moved on, doesn't she? Not too bothered anymore about the first responders, Brittany, and the Californian wildfires. She only was really interested when the disaster tourism was going to get her in the front page. Instead, we got this video from her, which she described as Sweet Pea Sunday. So even though the series is out, Brittany, there's still a lot more Meghan Markle to come. So who cares about the first responders, Brittany? She's just going to be tending to her garden and constantly trying to push the Netflix show, it seems.
I mean, I saw this video and I thought, oh my gosh, how dull. She really is quite dull and boring in many ways. This is not exciting. It is not interesting at all. And I'm like, who is engaging in this? Because it just looks nice. And like her father said, he can tell when she's lying or trying to make things perfect. And you just see this even in this little Instagram video as well. It's too perfect. Well, where's the chaos of a Sunday morning? Who's watching the kids if she's out tending the garden in this very slow and careful manner? The kids don't seem to be around. Who's watching the children? Because maybe it's not her husband because he was at this benefit. It's obviously not her. She's tending to the garden. So who's watching the kids? The nameless, faceless nannies they refuse to acknowledge exist, I guess. But I find her whole setup, company, the show, everything just so incredibly dull. We keep being told how successful and ambitious and amazing Meghan Markle is. And I never see it on screen. I just never, ever see it on screen.
No, indeed. And look, Thomas Markle says, we lived in a great area. This is in an interview, by the way, with the Mail on Sunday, Brittany. We lived in a great area, which was packed with restaurants. We ate out all the time. At weekends when I wasn't working, I'd take her to a dance class and then invite her and all her friends out for a meal. And he was particularly withering about Meghan's love of vast fruit platters, saying, I don't think most people these days can afford to go out and spend $90 on fruit. She's out of touch with normal people. She puts edible flowers on everything. No one has edible flowers handy. Sending kids off to school with edible flowers on their foods is silly. Kids don't like them. And if you put edible flowers in a kid's lunchbox, they would probably get teased at school. He also didn't like the one pot spaghetti, Brittany, where she fries vegetables, adds the raw spaghetti, which she calls noodles, and then adds water and puts the lid on. Thomas Markle said, who makes spaghetti that way? You always boil the water, then add the spaghetti. It is the most basic thing, and I couldn't agree more with that. But Brittany, what's brilliant is online snoops have actually been able to discover that Meghan's own words from her past, and this is what always happens, right, with a compulsive liar, their own words from their past come back to haunt them. So look at this juxtaposition between pre-royal Meghan Markle and how she used to speak about what food she ate growing up to the lies she pumped out on With Love Meghan. So which Meghan are we meant to believe, Brittany? Well, I'm going to plump for the Suits star, okay, rather than the lying former royal.
Well, I mean, so many things, Dan, about Meghan, what Meghan says about her past are just contradict each other constantly. She's constantly trying to reframe the narrative to fit her particular situation. You know, it makes more sense for her now to say she was a latchkey kid when her dad used to send a car to pick her up and take her to set so she could be around the other actors and the crew members. So which Meghan is it? And this comes down definitely to a fundamental problem with Meghan in the public eye. One that continues to haunt her is that she just has this real hard time sticking to one narrative about herself. And so because she's constantly changing, I think with an audience, especially one that's starting to track her after a specific period of time, she starts to undermine her own authenticity and her own ability to tell the truth, because she seems to imply a lot that she spent a lot of time in her childhood with her mom, which I think is, somewhat true. But we also know she was mostly raised by her dad because her mom went to start a career. And so she wants to uplift her mom, but it's like, but what about her dad? He was the one really raising her in many ways, and she just shucks him out the door. And so her whole concept of, you are invited to the table overall for her whole branding is, I think, an absolute mess, because we know the one person that she should invite that she refuses to is her own father.
Totally. Then we've got the other lie. Brittany, actually, there's so many lies. We're going to go through them all. But one of the other big lies is, of course, about the name Meghan Sussex. So first, can I tell you what Thomas Markle's reaction was to this? Because the grandmother that Meghan talks a lot about, according to Thomas, his mum, would be so disappointed to hear that Meghan no longer wants to use the name Markle. He says, my mother was proud to be a Markle, so am I. Meghan never had a problem with the Markle name until she met Prince Harry. And then with bitter sarcasm, he added, now I have to say I am Meghan Sussex's dad. So that's Thomas's take on the name debacle. But then, Brittany, we get to the King's cousin, Lord Ivor Mountbatten. And as Lee Cohen put it, this guy, by the way, has become a big star of the American version of The Traitors. And as Lee Cohen, our friend, put it, Lord Ivor Mountbatten has smacked down the disaster Duchess Meghan Markle for suggesting her last name is Sussex. Markle truly is the lowest of the low. Her lies are legion. And this was actually in an interview with Town and Country. And he could not be clearer, even though there has been a lot of consternation about exactly who's right on this name debacle. But let me just tell you exactly what Mountbatten told Town and Country, and then I'll get your reaction, Brittany. He said, it's interesting because she's completely incorrect. Her family name is not Sussex. Her family name is Mountbatten Windsor. Her children are called Archie and Lilibet Mountbatten Windsor. They're not called Archie and Lilibet Sussex because Sussex is a title. So they are the Duke and Duchess of Sussex, but actually he's Harry Mountbatten Windsor and she would be Meghan Mountbatten Windsor. And then Mountbatten called on his immediate family to further explain royal naming protocol to those of us outside of it. So this felt like quite a slap down for Meghan, especially, by the way, given I always have to remind people of this, Brittany, Town and Country is one of the few publications that remains a propagandist for the Sussexes.
Oh, yes, absolutely. They've run, I think, Meghan's article when she went to the Godmother's opening, that's where they got a big exclusive from her. But when it comes to this naming debacle, I mean, as far as I'm aware, she cannot use the surname Mountbatten Windsor because that exclusively resides with actual blood royals within the family. I mean, she can technically sort of use Sussex, but it's definitely a little weird. And what I come back to is that when it comes to this like naming debacle, she didn't slowly put this idea out there and kind of have a slow rollout. She just dropped the bomb on Drew going, I'm Meghan Sussex. And everybody's like, what are you talking about? So it's sort of this very much confusion situation that Meghan did not need to have when she has like, 6 different identities now. She has the brand Meghan, she has With Love, she has As Ever, she has American Riviera Orchard still out there. She has Meghan Markle, now Meghan Sussex and the Duchess of Sussex. And she still goes with everything as the Duchess of Sussex and only makes people call her Meghan Sussex in random situations. So it's very inconsistent. And I think muddies the water when she doesn't have to and just creates a whole lot of confusion. And it was completely and utterly unnecessary. I don't get it. I don't understand where she's trying to go with this. But I would bet you, Dan, that part of the big reason for this is that she hates the fact that Meghan Markle sort of stands for failure. And she's trying to amend that by going, well, I'm Meghan Sussex now, hoping to change the algorithms. But I don't really think that's going to happen.
Well, no, of course not, because then we get to possibly the most egregious lie of them all from the past few days. And this was how both Meghan Markle and Netflix decided to announce the renewal of With Love Meghan. So this was Markle's Instagram. And she says, let us remain calm or not, because I'm thrilled to share that season 2 of With Love Meghan is coming. By the way, lettuce, like lettuce and then remain.
So lame.
I know, just awful so awful
lame.
awful puns. Then, of course, it was picked up in the media who were very shocked given the reviews were so bad. Look at how the news broke on the brilliant Megyn Kelly's show. This is just a complete lie. And I'm not blaming Megyn Kelly, by the way, because she didn't know the details, but I am stunned by the compliant media who have not worked out the truth here. This is not a second series. They filmed one series. It was all filmed at one time. All Netflix has done is broken up when the episodes will be released. So they're dropping it in 2 parts. Now, that is something that Netflix does every now and then with some of its big shows. The Diplomat is one that I'm thinking of. But it doesn't mean that there are 2 seasons. It's one season filmed at one time, released in 2 parts.
Yes, this is exactly what is happening right now because my understanding is that there was only even a couple weeks break between the filming of seasons 1 and quote unquote season 2, which really should be season 1.5. And so they had filmed these back to back. So they had all the material in the can. And so Netflix had 2 options, given the dismal reviews, was either to can it or to go ahead with it and just see what happens. Because Netflix has, as far as I'm aware, she's a little bit murky on the details, has invested in her company. So Netflix is very, very much wanting to get all its pennies out of Meghan Markle and Prince Harry. And the only way they're going to do that is if people buy her products from As Ever. So it does make sense for them to split it into 2. But the media framing it as a renewal, and somebody said commissioning a second season. It's like, no, they didn't commission a second season. It's already been commissioned. It's already done. They're not filming new content. Like the content is already completed. And so her kind of framing this as, oh, a great triumph, I got season 2. That's just really not the case because The season 2 was already done. Netflix wants its pound of flesh. And so they're just going to keep trying to get this train going. But even though I would say views for her series probably haven't been horrible, the big test here for her is going to be, can she sell products? That's going to be the huge test going forward.
Well, yeah, and also I would argue, Brittany, though, too, viewing time, because that is actually the most important metric for Netflix. It's not just about getting into the chart. Now, it just snuck in. I think in the US, it snuck in at number 9 on the Netflix top 10. But I reckon it will drop very, very quickly. And what Netflix wants is people to stay tuned over a long period of time. I will be stunned when those numbers come out later in the year, if that is the case, because the show is just so boring. Most people haven't got to the last episode. But Brittany, some breaking news just in from the Mail. And this actually paints a fascinating picture about the truth of this renewal and how Netflix really feels about it. Let me take you through it. Netflix bosses are worried about dire reviews of Meghan's show, and her $100 million contract has not been renewed despite fanfare over the second season. This is Martin Robinson, their chief reporter, who writes, Meghan Markle's bosses at Netflix are worried by the grim reviews of her new show, and her own excited announcement of Series 2 does not mean the Sussex's $100 million deal has been renewed, an insider told the Daily Mail today. With Love, Meghan has dropped out of the top 10 most watched shows globally, as well as in the US and UK just 6 days after its release. It's not a runaway success, Mail Online's insider at Netflix has admitted, adding they understood that Season 2 was filmed back-to-back with Season 1 last year. And they say, a Netflix insider with links to the commercial arm of the streaming giant told the Daily Mail that the reviews have worried the bosses, especially as Netflix's partner in her As Ever brand. And a new season does not mean her Netflix contract has been renewed. And this source says, I know they filmed a lot of the shows back to back. I know they filmed all the shows back to back. So in theory, there is no second season. It's like with lots of Netflix shows, it is already in the bag at the same time as the first one. What this does is allow edits to be made to the show from feedback from press and Netflix viewers. It's clever and cost effective. So no, the overall content hasn't been renewed yet. The source added that bosses were worried about the poor reviews, especially as they are a business partner in her lifestyle brand. And they said the industry Bibles like The Hollywood Reporter and Variety are not keen on it. Netflix bosses are all worried now because they have invested a lot in the product line. They don't know how and when to roll it all out. And actually, Brittany, what's so fascinating, if you look, and we've got a bit of a compilation here, I showed it to you earlier as well. If you look at the left-wing media, it is their reviews of With Love, Meghan that is arguably the most shocking of this all. Because, of course, these are the people who she would have hoped would be in her camp, would be Team Meghan. But, the cut was absolutely brutal, for example. Or actually, let me just read a little bit of the Rolling Stone review, too, which is headlined, Meghan Markle is just a girl standing in front of fans asking them to love her. And it says, it's hard to escape the contradictions at the heart of her latest rebrand. She speaks often of how things don't need to be perfect while striving to make them perfect. She betrays an obvious concern about how she's perceived alongside a seeming lack of self-awareness. It all makes her core message frustratingly unclear. And this was perhaps the most shocking of them all, Brittany. The San Francisco Chronicle, right? So the most left-wing part of all of America, and even they have turned on Meghan, saying With Love, Meghan has all the entertainment value of a hostage video. So it's interesting and maybe good reason for Netflix to be worried, Brittany.
Oh, 100%. If I was them, I would be really starting to freak out at this point, because what I think after all the negative reviews came out within the first day or two, what I think was driving a lot of the views is people seeing the reviews and thinking, it really can't be that bad, can it? And then they watched it and they're like, oh my goodness, it is that bad. So I would be incredibly worried about it at this point, because what she needed was to convert people into following her and her brand. And I don't think she's achieved that through this show. And I think most of the watching, I don't even know if I would call it hate watching, more just like, is this that bad? And so those people, if she hasn't converted them, then who's going to buy her products? And her product offerings are very pathetic in my opinion. We got a spread, we've got a crepe mix, we have tea, like all these things.
Oh, don't forget the edible flowers. Do not forget the edible flowers.
She's trying to drown us in flowers on that show.
I hope no one is stupid enough to buy those edible flowers.
One of the biggest talking points comes from Meghan's description of her upbringing. In With Love, Meghan, she reflects on growing up as a latchkey kid and mentions eating plenty of fast food and TV dinners during her childhood. However, Thomas Markle strongly disputes that characterization. According to him, while there were occasional TV dinners due to his demanding work schedule, he says their lifestyle was far more comfortable than Meghan's comments suggest. He claims they regularly ate at restaurants, spent weekends together, and enjoyed what he describes as a stable middle-class upbringing. This disagreement raises a larger question that has followed Meghan for years. Has her public description of her childhood changed depending on the audience or context? Supporters argue that personal experiences are subjective and that Meghan is simply sharing her own memories. Critics, meanwhile, believe the contrast between her statements and her father's account creates inconsistencies that deserve scrutiny. Regardless of where viewers stand, the differing versions of the same story continue to fuel public debate. Another recurring criticism involves authenticity. Throughout the video, commentators suggest that Meghan's on-screen persona often appears highly controlled and carefully curated. Thomas Markle himself argues that she tends to rehearse and carefully plan her public appearances rather than presenting herself naturally. Critics point to the polished presentation of With Love, Meghan as evidence of this tendency. They argue that the show feels more like a carefully managed brand exercise than an authentic glimpse into everyday life. On the other hand, supporters note that virtually every television production is heavily planned and edited. Lifestyle programming, by its nature, often emphasizes aesthetics, presentation, and visual appeal. Still, the authenticity question remains central to the public conversation surrounding Meghan's media projects. Perhaps the central theme running through the entire discussion is consistency. The video's commentators repeatedly argue that Meghan has presented different versions of events over the years. They point to statements about her childhood, family relationships, and public identity as examples of what they view as shifting narratives. Supporters of Meghan reject that interpretation. They argue that people's understanding of their own experiences evolves over time and that isolated quotes can sometimes appear contradictory when removed from their full context. This difference in interpretation sits at the heart of the controversy. Is Meghan changing her story, or are critics selectively highlighting differences to build a particular narrative? That question remains open to debate. The latest criticism surrounding Meghan Markle highlights just how polarizing she remains in the public eye. Whether discussing her childhood, her Netflix projects, her relationship with her father, or even her name, nearly every aspect of her public image continues to spark intense discussion. What makes this situation particularly notable is that many of the strongest criticisms are now coming from people who know her personally, including her father. At the same time, supporters continue to argue that much of the criticism reflects a broader effort to scrutinize and challenge everything she does. As always, the truth is likely more complex than either side would suggest. Now we'd like to hear from you. Do you think the criticism raised in this controversy is justified, or do